All right, in this lesson we're going to review the Pythagorean theorem, and that's something that we use when we need to find the missing side in a right triangle. So the squares of the legs of a right triangle are equal to the squares of the hypotenuse. So a squared plus b squared equals c squared is how we typically label it and think of it. I can also use Pythagorean theorem to find out if something is a right triangle or if it's an obtuse triangle or an acute triangle. So here I want to think about for 3, 5, and 4, which side is the hypotenuse, and we know that the hypotenuse is always the longest side. So 5 is my hypotenuse, and 3 and 4 are the legs. So I'm going to say 3 squared plus 4 squared equals 5 squared. 3 squared is 9, 4 squared is 16, 5 squared is 25. 9 plus 16 is 25 equals 25. So I can say yes, this is a right triangle because Pythagorean theorem was true. Let's take another one. How about 13, 18, and 20? So what's the longest side? The hypotenuse is 20. So I've got 13 squared plus 18 squared equals 20 squared. All right, 13 squared is, 13 squared plus 18 squared is 493. I didn't do it out separately, and that equals 400. All right, so they're not equal, and what I know is that if my hypotenuse is larger than my legs, then it is going to be obtuse. If my hypotenuse is smaller than my legs, then it's going to be acute. So I can say that this is an acute triangle, not a right triangle. Okay. So we do use Pythagorean theorem, solve for missing sides. So I have two sides here, they're the legs, and what's important is finding the hypotenuse and setting it up to where the hypotenuse is always the thing by itself. So 4 squared plus 8 squared equals, we can call that c squared, whatever label you want to give it. 16 plus 64 equals c squared. Add that up, 80 equals c squared. Now, in right triangles, typically we want to leave things as a simplified radical rather than a decimal. So I'm going to solve this by taking the square root of both sides, and then I have to think about square root of 80 is going to be a decimal. So let's write this the other way around. We're looking at square root 80. Well, square root of 80 I know to be 8 times 10. I'm going to start breaking this down and looking for perfect squares. So 4 times 2 is 8, 5 times 2 is 10. So right there I've got 2's that need to come outside the radical. 4 is 2 times 2, that's another perfect square that's going to come out. And the only thing left inside is the 5. So 2 times 2 is 4. Radical 5 is your final answer. All right, we'll try another one. This one would be the same. Why don't you pause, see if you can do it on your own. We're going to be looking for the hypotenuse. Okay, so we're going to have 8 squared plus 15 squared equals c squared. 64 plus 225 equals c squared. Add those up, 289 equals c squared. And try it in my calculator. And this one did come out to be a perfect square, so I don't have to factor anything. All right, now sometimes your missing side is a leg. So here we have, I'm going to set this up, leg squared plus leg squared equals hypotenuse squared. This is what's really important, is getting my hypotenuse always by itself. X squared plus 81 equals 196. Subtract 81 from both sides, and I've got x squared equaling 115. Take the square root of both sides, x equals square root of 115. Try it in my calculator and see if it works out. It is a decimal. Then I'm going to try to factor it. I'm going to divide by 5 because it ends in 5, and it turns out to be 5 times 23. However, there's no numbers that multiply to make 23, nor 5, so this is actually as simple as it gets. So that's going to be your final answer there. Okay, here's one for you to try. Pause the video, see if you can set it up and do it. We'll call this x, so a leg squared plus a leg squared is going to equal to hypotenuse squared. X squared plus 400 equals 625. Subtract 400 from both sides, and x squared is going to equal 225. X is going to equal the square root of 225. Try it in your calculator, and it did come out to be 15. All right, now what we're going to focus on is setting up word problems with Pythagorean theorems. So here, I want you to always draw a picture. When you show your work, draw a picture, because that's going to make sure you get it straight. Don't just try to do it straight from the words. All right, so a telephone pole is 12 meters tall. So we know a telephone pole would be the thing coming out of the ground. It's going to make a right angle with the ground. The pigeon, there's a pigeon standing over here, and he's 5 meters from the pole, and he's going to fly to the top of the pole. And how far is that? All right, so just like before, leg squared plus leg squared equals hypotenuse squared. Work out the numbers. Add these up. Take the square root, and in this case, 169 is a perfect square. And we're going to say it is 13 meters that it flew. Our unit of measure was meters. All right, the next one, we're going to go to the movies. We're going to drive north for 7 miles, so that's going straight up. Then you're going to go east for 24 miles. But if you had gone on Palm Street, you would have gone directly to the movies. Here's your variable. Looking for the hypotenuse, 7 squared, leg plus leg equals hypotenuse squared. Work out these numbers. Add them up. Take their square roots. And in this case, it came out nice and even of 25 miles. And one more example, then we'll be done. All right, we're going to do a zip line. So zip line, typically we got a tower. You're going to ride the zip line from the top to the bottom, and here's the ground. Okay, so she's going to go down 20 feet on a zip line. The distance from the base, so that's here, to the finish, which is here, is 15 feet. And then how tall up is the tower. All right, so leg squared plus leg squared equals hypotenuse squared. Work out these numbers. X squared plus 225 equals 400. Subtract 225 from both sides. X squared equals 175. And take the square root of that. Now here's where we can do this differently, because it is a word problem. We don't need to leave it in radical form, because that's not how we think about distance, right? We don't usually say I'm 5 square roots of 2 miles from here. So we can put this in our calculator, and we would get x equals 13.23 feet. And we're going to look and see, does that make sense for this problem? So we know it needs to be less than 20, because that's our hypotenuse, and that's got to be the largest thing. And so that does seem to make sense for this case. All right, so that is a quick look at Pythagorean theorem, and we will talk to you soon. Bye.